Ever feel like, you can't step into the same river twice? And no, I don't mean like making the same mistakes over and over again, but like, have you ever really thought about how much change defines our lives? Well, that's what we're diving into today with Heraclitus.
Heraclitus.
He's the ancient Greek philosopher who got stuck with the nickname, get this, the weeping philosopher.
Yeah, he had that nickname, but uh, don't be fooled. It's not all doom and gloom with this guy. Honestly, Heraclitus was wrestling with a truth so big, so fundamental, that we're still trying to wrap our heads around it thousands of years later.
Okay, so who was this guy? And, was he always a bummer? Like, why the dramatic nickname?
All right, so picture this. Heraclitus, born into a wealthy family, could have had it all, right?
Yeah.
But instead of like fancy parties and whatnot, he chooses to dive headfirst into the big questions about life, the universe, everything. I mean, talk about a life choice.
Yeah, no kidding.
So he's like a proto-philosopher, paving the way for the big names like Socrates and Plato. But get this, only fragments of his actual writings survived. So we're basically trying to piece together his philosophy from the scraps. It's like a giant puzzle with most of the pieces missing.
A philosophical jigsaw puzzle. So let's talk about, I guess, his most famous idea, the one that's practically everywhere these days. Everything flows. Or, if you want to get fancy, Pantere.
Pantere, exactly.
But doesn't that, I don't know, seem kind of obvious? I mean, like, we all know things change, right?
It might seem obvious now, right? But back then, Heraclitus was like shaking things up. See, back in his day, many people thought reality was like this solid, unchanging thing. But Heraclitus comes along and basically says, nope, everything is in flux. And to explain this whole idea, he used the metaphor of a river.
Oh, yeah, the river.
Right, because the water's always moving, flowing, so every time you step into it, it's different, you're different, it's a whole new experience.
So he wasn't just talking about, actual rivers. It was a metaphor for, like, everything, right?
Yeah, that's it. He was saying that change is the one constant in our relationships, our work, even our sense of self. Think about it.
Yeah, okay.
We age, we learn new things, we form new beliefs, and hopefully let go of some old ones.
Yeah.
I mean, what we thought was so important at 20 might seem totally meaningless to us at 40, right?
Totally. Okay, but I can see how that could be, I don't know, kind of overwhelming for some people.
Yeah.
So was he saying that nothing lasts? That everything just, like, falls apart?
Well, not exactly. I think that's where a lot of people misunderstand Heraclitus.
Yeah.
It's not that things fall apart, but that they're constantly in motion, transforming. Think of it like I don't know, like a dance.
A dance?
Yeah, a dance. It's always moving, always changing, but it's still a dance, you know? It's a process.
So instead of, like, fighting change, we should learn to, dance with it. I like that. And that actually, it makes me think of another one of those Heraclitus singers, the unity of opposites. How does that fit into all of this whole, like, cosmic dance we're talking about?
Ah, see, that's where Heraclitus really throws us a curveball. He's not just saying everything changes. He's saying that opposing forces, they aren't actually opposed. They're totally interconnected. Like they need each other to exist.
Okay, now you just have to unpack that one a bit for me.
All right. Think of it like this, right? You can't have light without darkness. There's no up without down. These things, they define each other.
Mm-hmm.
And Heraclitus believed that this principle, this interplay, it applied to, well, everything. He even went so far as to say, war is the father of all things.
Whoa. Okay, hold on a second. Is he, like, saying war is good? Because that seems, I don't know.
Not exactly. You got to remember, Heraclitus, he saw things a little differently. When he said war, he was talking about that inherent conflict, that tension between opposites as the driving force behind creation, behind change. It's like without friction, without those challenges, well, there's no growth.
So, like, even those tough times when we feel stuck, lost, maybe even a little beat up, those are all essential parts of, well, the whole shebang.
Exactly. And this all ties back to, you guessed it, logos. Imagine this. A universal principle, a kind of cosmic reason that connects and governs like everything. That's how Heraclitus understood logos.
Logos.
Okay, and he believed that most people, they're totally oblivious to it. But for him, logos, it was the key to wisdom, to figuring out how to live in sync with this ever-changing reality.
So logos, it's like this big, mysterious, underlying force. Are we talking like divine reason here? The meaning of life? I gotta be honest, this logos thing, it's a little intimidating.
Yeah, logos, it's one of those words that, it's almost impossible to translate perfectly. It's definitely more than just like logic or reason. It's more like the underlying principle, this force of order and interconnection that governs the entire cosmos, everything. And, Heraclitus, he actually used the image of fire to describe Logos.
Okay, fire. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So think about it. Fire, it's constantly in motion, right?
Yeah.
Transforming, changing, but it's also this powerful source of energy and even, purification. So for Heraclitus, fire, it was the perfect metaphor for Logos. This dynamic, ever-changing, but ultimately harmonious nature of, well, everything.
Okay, so by trying to understand this logos, this kind of fire within and around us, are we getting closer to understanding, I don't know, like the true nature of reality itself?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And for Heraclitus, it wasn't enough to just, have knowledge about this stuff. It was about really, truly grasping the interconnectedness of it all, the ever-changing nature of, well, everything. He was actually pretty critical of people who just kind of went through life clinging to this illusion of permanence,
Yeah.
oblivious. He even said, and this is a good one, many learn, but few understand.
Oof, burn. Even from beyond the grave, Heraclitus is calling us out. But honestly, it's so true, right? I mean, think about it. We are just bombarded with information constantly these days, but how much of it do we really truly internalize? Like, how much of it actually changes us? So how do we tap into this logos? How do we avoid ending up on Heraclitus's philosophical burn list?
It's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah,
And I'll be honest, there's no easy answer. It's not like Heraclitus left us some kind of ancient Greek self-help guide.
right.
He'd probably tell us to, stop looking for shortcuts.
Yeah, probably.
But I think if we really look at his ideas, the core stuff, we can at least find some clues, some guidance for this whole logos thing.
Okay, so what's like step one? How do we even begin to get off that philosophical burn list?
Well, remember that river metaphor we talked about?
Yeah.
Right. It all starts with remembering the river. Embrace the flow of change. Don't waste your energy trying to fight the current. That's where we get into trouble, clinging to the idea that things can stay the same. Heraclitus, he was convinced that that's a recipe for frustration, unhappiness, all of that.
It's like trying to hold on to water, right?
Exactly. The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers.
You just end up with nothing.
Exactly. And this all ties in with that idea about the unity of opposites. When we can start to see those seemingly opposite forces in life, joy and sorrow, success and failure, light and dark, not as separate things, but as two sides of the same coin, well, it changes how we experience everything. Those ups and downs, they all become part of the same dance.
So instead of fearing those challenges, those inevitable changes, we can try to reframe them, like see them as opportunities for growth even.
Now you're getting it. And that's where logos comes in. It's not about controlling everything, trying to force things to be a certain way. It's about recognizing that underlying harmony in the midst of all the seeming contradictions.
Wow. This has been, I don't know, really eye-opening. Heraclitus, the weeping philosopher.
Yeah.
More like the wise philosopher, am I right?
He was onto something.
He reminds us that change, it's unavoidable, it's going to happen, but it's not something to be afraid of.
Exactly.
If we can find a way to embrace the flow, keep searching for deeper understanding, and really grasp this idea that everything is connected, well, maybe then we can find some peace. And who knows, maybe even some joy in the midst of all the chaos.
I love that.
So, to wrap things up, next time you're going through it, just remember, you're not alone. We're all part of this big, messy, ever-changing cosmic dance. And maybe, just maybe, that's not such a bad thing after all.